It had an 08 center console with cup holders, nice Corbeau seats, still had carpet in it, still had the dash in it, and a part of me had a hard time letting that go. And I remember people giving me a hard time about, oh, well, you could pull the whole dash out in the seats and you'd save like 30 pounds. Like, yeah, or what if I lose 30 pounds and we could keep it? So at that time, I started dieting heavy. Over time, I actually lost 50 pounds. A lot of that was for the race truck. I know, kudos. Like, it sounds silly, but part of me wanted to go faster. And all right, so we left off in the last video talking about COVID time, racing during COVID. It was a lot of fun. It was a weird experience with everything being shut down in the whole world. Even traveling to events was really tough, wearing masks. They literally wanted you to wear a mask in the truck just in case you were on camera. It was a weird time. But we were starting to work out some of the kinks on the truck, and at the time we did set the record for the fastest 6.0 Powerstroke. I remember it was in Texas at the Texas Truck Jam. The track was prepped really well. We clicked off a bunch of 563s. That time, that was the record for the 6.0 Powerstroke. One of the fastest Powerstrokes, I had to look at the list, but it was getting near the top. And we were still leaf sprung in the back. We were stock suspension up front, except it had been lowered with cut coils. I mean, we were pushing the limits. The truck was starting to run pretty clean. We were working out a lot of the kinks regarding launching, staging. I mean, I still remember we were struggling to get the turbo lit. And we found out later on a lot of that had to do with the ice box that we were running. With too cold of an air intake charge on the ice box, especially if you ran dry ice, anytime we fired any nitrous to get the turbo going, it would just backfire and pop. There are lots of embarrassing videos with us sitting at the line, just backfiring, flames coming out the stack. And a lot of it had to do with the ice box that we were running. It was just too cold of an intake air charge, especially when it got cold at night. At low RPMs, it would just backfire. So innovation was a big part of Lucky. We were working through a lot of different designs with people. We tried different O-ring designs, different piston bowl designs, different head designs, injector designs. We tried different turbos, S480s, GT50s, GT55s. We spent a lot of times testing parts on Lucky, and that didn't always go well. She was down a lot. A lot of times we were replacing parts and testing things. We didn't post a lot about it because look, that's how R&D goes. When you try new stuff, it doesn't always work out right. But Lucky was down 30 to 40 times a year from engine problems, turbo problems, injector problems, whatever it was. Not necessarily reliability, but just testing new and innovative parts often led to downtime, trying out new parts and switching them out. One of the big issues that we had was with high pressure oil pumps. We were running a twin pump design from Kevin Sear, and we kept blowing pump seals out of it. We couldn't figure out why. Well, we changed a few things on the kit, changed a few things on the tuning, and now virtually have no issues with that. But man, that was a big issue that year. I remember we'd go 1 or 2 passes before we had to change a pump out. It was horrendous. We'd carry a big box of spare pumps in the truck. We actually broke high pressure oil pumps too, snapped a few OEM shafts, snapped a few thumper 2s, blew out oil seals. We were pushing limits on what pressure you could run through the Huey system. We were also trying different staging limiters, different manual IPRs. We learned a lot along the way, but man, I just remember that being so frustrating. You get on the line, blow a pump seal, dump oil right there on the track, and it would shut us down. So some of the things that we went through that we had struggles with was, like I said, the oil pump issues, radiator issues. I don't know what it was. Having that radiator mounted in the bed with those really long lines running through the motor with an electric pump instead of the OEM pump, I don't know why, it just puked all the time. Anytime we were on the dyno or the track, it puked water out the radiator cap. We tried a thicker radiator cap, we tried a degas bottle, we tried changing the height of the radiator, the angle of the radiator, we tried overfilling it, underfilling it. No matter what we did, it seemed to get some sort of vapor lock or air in the system that we actually, I don't think we ever did figure that out on Lucky. I think the day we tore it down, we were still having problems with the degas bottle or the radiator cap blowing off. And it was not head gaskets. We'd pull the engine apart, check the head gaskets, it was fine. We thought it was cracked blocks. We did find a crack, very small crack once. I still don't think that was it. But for some reason, we just never could get the cooling system figured out. So at this point, we started doing a lot of the tuning ourselves. Chris at TSD tuned the truck originally, had everything dialed in. But we were changing things like staging limiter, the trans tuning, the nitrous tuning, just getting things to spool up faster. As I said, we struggled a lot with spooling those bigger turbos. 6 liters are very small displacement, plus the Huey and the old tuning. It made it pretty hard to spool a really big single. But we were starting to get things dialed in. It was pretty cool. We made 2 steps where we could shoot flames out the stack. We started working on EGTs, spool up, fueling. We had a Davis traction control system that we were learning how to use. Getting different jet sizes. We thought we were running a lot of nitrous, but we really weren't. So we started bumping up more and more nitrous, backing off the fuel, and the truck started running cleaner, and the truck started running cooler, and we were cracking off 590s like it was nothing. At that time, we weren't racing Pro Street. We ran 590s, and it was like nothing. It was very easy to run a 590. Our reaction time was always slow on the foot brake, but we could basically run 590, 591s all day long. It was pretty cool. I wouldn't say we were extremely competitive because of our slow reaction time, but at least in qualifying, we'd always do really well. And then when it got to eliminations, we'd get knocked out because of our reaction time, but we still did really good. So the truck was still purple at that time. We were working on the wrap. We wanted it to be big, vibrant. We wanted it to stand out. And we came up with a super cool design that I still really love. It's still on Lucky right now. And we got it wrapped, I believe it was right before UCC. I think that was UCC 2021. And we went to the event with high hopes of doing really well. We had our sled pull set up, all ready to go. We were ready to go to the dyno, ready to go to the track, ready to break some records. And it didn't go great. Track day was fine, but we ended up hurting a converter, so it knocked us out a little early, and we had to change out the converter. And we stayed up late, not a big deal. Changing converters isn't that hard, but you know, on the asphalt, on our backs, in the parking lot, changing converter, but we got it done. Because of the trans problems, we didn't set any records or anything. We had some pretty good times. I have to look back. I think they were 540s or 550s. Nothing revolutionary. Still pretty fast, still pretty competitive. But the next day was the dyno. As I said, we stayed up all night long, changed the converter. Everything was ready to go. The truck sat basically all day. I think we had a later dyno in the afternoon. And it was about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to the dyno. We wanted to start the truck, get it running, top off fluids, and make sure it was all good to go. I remember we started it, and it was sitting there idling in the parking lot, and it started making this weird belt squeak sound. It sounded like maybe the belt was slipping. The noise got louder and louder, and it turned out that we had dropped something in the intake or dropped a valve. We weren't sure what was wrong, but the engine was knocking. We had about an hour and a half to get to the dyno. I was exhausted. I was beat, I was tired, I was disappointed, and at that point I was planning on not running the dyno because I did not think we could tear the head off, find out what was wrong on the cylinder, and then get it back and going before the dyno event. At this time I think we had like hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. We had like 2 or 3 people in front of us, and I went and sat next to the trailer just defeated. I remember Joe Harms being there, Kyle from Warren Diesel at that time, I think he was at SPE Diesel right now, Jared at Kill Devil Diesel. Gosh, there was a few other people there. I'm sorry for forgetting people's names. We'll post up a picture though. And they were like, man, what are you doing? You got to be on the dyno in 2 hours. And I was like, the motor's knocking. I don't even think we have the spare parts to fix it. Gosh, we stayed up all night, changed the converter and get everything running. I was basically ready to give up. I'm not going to say I was crying, but nearly in tears. And they just jumped right in, and they were like, we could do this. I remember just everybody surrounded the front of the truck. Everyone had air guns or electric guns, and they had out ratchets. And man, they ripped off that head while I was just standing there in amazement. Pulled off the head, found out the valve seat dropped. I don't know how or why, just random. We were idling there in the pits when the valve seat dropped, and it destroyed the piston, destroyed the head. We didn't have any spare parts. I didn't have enough time to change the piston, and I didn't have a spare head to throw on there. Someone ran over to the Kill Devil Diesel booth, grabbed the spare head. We pushed the piston all the way past top dead center so it stuck out of the top, and they just took an electric grinder, flattened the top of the piston, blew out the cylinder with air, and put the head back on, torqued it down. They were calling our name for disqualification as we left the pit, rushing the dyno. If I remember right, it was a countdown of like 10, 9, 8, and if we weren't on the dyno before they got to 0, we'd be disqualified. But we got on the dyno. We got strapped down. At this point, I was like, F it. I'm gonna throw everything at it. I didn't even care if the motor blows up, and I really wanted to shoot for 2,000 horsepower. We ran the first dyno run. I wanted to say it was like a 1836 horsepower and something like 2,300 torque. And although that was a good number, record breaking for us, we wanted to push for the 2,000. And I remember something happened near the end when we were about to run one more dyno, and it just lost all power. We popped the hood off real fast. We were looking at everything. We found out we blew off a map hose, so the map sensor wasn't getting any boost, so it wouldn't fuel hard. And we were rushing to get it fixed, grabbing tools, burning hot, reaching in underneath there. We got the map sensor put on, the map hose installed, got on the dyno, and I think we had like a minute and 30 seconds left. And per the rules, if you have your tires rolling and you are moving, they will let you finish the dyno run, which we were. I remember I was sitting there, tires rolling, let's go. let's do this. And they literally started unstrapping us from the dyno. I was like, no, 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 no. There's time on the clock. And they kicked us off. I was pretty pissed at the time. I don't know exactly what happened or why, but they definitely broke the rules. We were pissed. I whined about it. We carried on. We got over it. But it was a pretty upsetting moment for us because we had a lot more in it and giant injectors in there and a lot more nitrous to spray. But with 1 minute and 30 seconds on the clock, they kicked us off the dyno. I don't know, must have been in a hurry that day or something. I remember being so mad. I remember it was Cody that did it too. Sorry if you're watching this, Cody. We're cool now. I got over it. I was being a little bit of a baby back bitch at the time, but it was really disappointing. So we took the truck off the dyno, put it in the pits, changing everything over to the sled pulling. I mean, we're not sled pullers, so we were borrowing stuff. I remember Dirty Hooker Diesel came over and they were like, that hitch isn't gonna work. And they actually welded us a new hitch and put it on for the truck to make sure we could run it. We borrowed weights from Warren Diesel. We got everything set up, went over to the sled pull area, weighed in and got ready to go. And I was super nervous, having virtually never sled pulled before, except for the one time in 2-wheel drive where all we did was spin our tires. But this time we were set up. We were 4-wheel drive, we had weights on the front, a big hitch in the back. I was super excited. And we did decent. I'm not gonna say we did great, but man, that was a violent run. The front tires were bouncing like crazy for some reason. It was bouncing so hard it shattered the windshield, shook everything loose in the cab. I think we went like 150 feet. I'd have to look it back up. It was not impressive, but we did it. We did all 3 events. We made it through the whole event. We didn't play super high, but for us, that was a huge accomplishment. It was a lot of fun at UCC. We had a lot of help from a lot of other crews, and that was one of the most memorable UCCs for me, just because of the camaraderie. All the people that helped us from the other teams, they helped us make the hitch. They added weights to our truck. I mean, everyone was there helping each other out. And when I ran into defeat that day that it dropped the valve seat, I mean, I just stood back and watched as other people worked on my truck for me. I mean, I did jump in there and help eventually, but they were doing most of the wrenching and most of the work as I sat there feeling defeated. I mean, we don't have a big team. I think it was me and Tony and maybe Ben that year. I think Jake might have been there. We didn't have a crew of 18 in a giant tent with a lift and a bunch of spare parts. We're a small shop, small team, but man, a lot of people came to help us out and it was super cool. After that, we were working through a lot of issues. The truck was getting better and better, faster and faster, and getting more and more dialed in. I remember the last event we went to with Lucky, it was Rudy's in the fall, I believe. That might have been October 2021. I don't think it was 2022, I think it was October 2021. And we had a couple of first good passes and then the nitrous stopped working. Every time we went down the track, it was fuel only. We'd go back to the pits, check the nitrous controller, we checked all the solenoids, we checked the relays, we checked the tuning, everything looked good. By the end of the night, we got knocked out for going too slow and back in the pits. I remember specifically, it was Tony, Jared, and I, super upset. Back in the pits, we were kind of arguing, fighting over what the problem was. We'd had a lot of wiring issues up until this point. And going back, hindsight, we hid everything behind the dash, all the relays, all the nitrous controllers. It was a street truck at first, so we wanted all that hidden. But when it came down to diagnosing problems, it became almost impossible to look at the wires, to test the wires, to figure out what's going on. And it became pretty heated. After such a tough year, the struggles with UCC, a couple of blown engines, a couple of transmission problems, I don't remember all the problems, but they were constant. And this was basically our last event of the year, and we wanted to go fast, and we didn't. And I remember arguing in the pits that the wiring became like a big issue. And I remember arguing back and forth. I wanted to figure out what was wrong and go to the next race. And Tony and Jared, they were like, look, you just need to rewire the whole truck. At that point, I was like, man, once we rewire this truck, it's going to be down for so long. We've got a small issue, which I believe ended up being a Maximizer 5 that had died on us, just randomly. I don't know why. Max 5 wasn't working. Swapped out the Max 5. Everything worked fine. But at that time, we were ready to rewire the whole truck. And I remember, to this day, we still argue about it. Tony and Jared were like, oh, it'll take like 2 weeks to rewire the whole truck. And it's like, no, I'm telling you, once you rip all the wires out of the truck, it's going to be down for months, if not years. I've seen it happen time and time again. Nobody rewires a race truck in 2 weeks. And after the event, we tore the truck completely down, everything out of it, because to rewire it, you had to pull the engine, had to pull the trans, had to pull the dash, and the truck got completely torn down and never got put back together again. That was the last time we ever took Lucky to the track. It's still sitting with no engine, no transmission, no wires in it, and a lot came down to it. We wanted to go so fast, we were gonna have to redo the whole cage. We were too heavy. We're sitting at like 5,200 pounds. We were gonna have to back half it, cut out the cage we had, cut out all the suspension we had, 4-link it front, 4-link it rear, rewire the whole truck. We were gonna change the whole radiator system because we've been having problems with it. Basically, we were gonna have to build a whole new truck from the ground up. But it started with the wiring. If we hadn't torn the wiring out, we'd probably still have Lucky running and going. But we had a lot of decisions to make on how much money to spend, how long it was gonna be down. And at that time, Trey Donovan was selling his truck. And he basically had everything done to his truck that we wanted. Now, it wasn't a regular cab short bed, which I'm still disappointed about. It is a regular cab long bed, but he'd had a lot of problems with the truck getting it dialed in. He had his own issues, but it was not his suspension, his back half, his cage, his 4-link, or his cab that were his problems. And I knew I could work out the other solutions, so it was a tough decision, but at that point, we decided to go ahead and put Lucky to the side, and we were gonna move forward with this new race truck that we bought from Trey Donovan.